The massive steel doors of detention facility Omega-7 groaned under the impact of another devastating blow. Deep in the heart of the most secure prison in the galaxy, something monstrous was trying to break free. The reinforced walls built to withstand the firepower of entire battle fleets. Shuddered like leaves in a hurricane, Commander Hyanwu Park stood in the control room, his weathered face illuminated by dozens of warning lights flashing red across the monitoring systems. Each alarm represented another system failure, another security breach that brought them closer to disaster. The smell of burnt electronics filled the air as overloaded circuits sparked and died throughout the facility. Below in the maximum security, Wing Vextal paced its cell like a caged nightmare. The creature was a living weapon from the extinct Vorthok Empire, standing 15 feet tall with an obsidian hide that seemed to absorb light itself. Bioelectric energy crackled across its massive frame in blue-white arcs, and its 6 muscular arms ended in claws that could shred titanium like paper. 3 pairs of burning red eyes tracked every movement of the terrified guards beyond the energy barriers. "Status report," Hyanwu commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos of alarms and shouting technicians. Lieutenant Taman rushed forward, his uniform soaked with sweat despite the facility's climate control. His hands trembled as he held his datapad. "Sir, the casualty count has reached 23 in just 6 months. We lost 2 more handlers yesterday when it broke through level 6 containment." Hyanwu's jaw tightened. 23 good people dead, each one a specialist who had trained for years to handle dangerous alien prisoners. The Council had sent their best xenobiologists, combat veterans, even psychic operatives. None had survived more than a few days with the creature. "What about the neural dampeners?" Hyanwu asked, though he already knew the answer from Taman's expression. "Completely ineffective, sir. The creature's nervous system adapted within hours. It's like it's evolving specifically to counter our technology." Taman's voice cracked slightly. The psionic restraints lasted 3 days before it developed immunity. 3 of our telepathic enforcers are still in medical comas from the psychic feedback when it broke free. The facility shook again as another thunderous roar echoed from the depths. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls as backup generators struggled to maintain power. Through the thick observation windows, they could see Vextal testing the energy barriers of its cell, each touch sending cascades of sparks through the containment grid. Dr. Minho, facility's chief xenobiologist, approached with a grim expression. His pristine lab coat was stained with chemical burns, and his gray hair was disheveled from days of sleepless research. "Commander, I've analyzed the creature's behavior patterns. It's not just trying to escape anymore." "What do you mean?" Hyanwu turned to face the scientist. "It's learning, studying us. Every security measure we deploy, every weapon we use against the creature memorizes and develops countermeasures. Yesterday it demonstrated tactical knowledge of our guard rotations. It knew exactly when the shift change would create a 15-second gap in surveillance." The implications sent a chill down Hyanwu's spine. They weren't just dealing with a mindless beast. This was an intelligent predator that was systematically dismantling their defenses. Sir Taman's shout drew their attention to the main display screen. The Vorthok Warbeast has breached containment level 7 again. It's standing at the barrier, and it's making gestures. On the screen, Vexel stood motionless at the energy barrier, its 6 arms moving in what could only be described as sign language. The universal battle challenge used across dozens of warrior species throughout the galaxy. "It's demanding single combat," Dr. Minho whispered in horror. "It wants to fight our strongest warriors one-on-one." Hyanwu closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. The Vorthok Empire had been extinct for over 2 centuries, wiped out by their own creations during the final days of their war with the Galactic Federation. But before their fall, they had achieved something terrifying. They had engineered the perfect biological weapon. Vextal was their masterpiece, a creature designed to grow stronger with each victory, more intelligent with each battle, more deadly with each kill, and it was winning. The creature had already defeated the Council's best combat specialists. It outsmarted their finest strategists, and adapted to technology that had taken centuries to develop. Each victory only made it more dangerous, more cunning, more unstoppable. "Commander," came another voice from across the control room. Security Chief Wenshik stood at his console, his face pale as he monitored the facility's defensive systems. "The creature has somehow interfaced with our computer networks, studying our schematics, our personnel files, even our emergency protocols." "That's impossible," Hyan-Wu said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were dealing with something beyond their understanding. "Sir, with respect, we need to consider termination protocols," Taman said quietly. "We can't contain it much longer. The next breach might not be into an empty corridor." Hyan-Wu stared at the monitor, showing Vextel's burning red eyes. The creature seemed to be looking directly at him through the camera, as if it knew exactly who was in charge of its imprisonment. For a moment, he felt like prey being studied by an apex predator. "Activate termination protocols," he finally ordered, the words feeling like defeat. "We can't risk the world exploded, eh?" Massive detonation rocked the facility as Vextel somehow triggered an overload in the containment grid. Emergency lights failed throughout entire sections as the backup power systems strained under the surge through the observation window. They watched in horror as the creature tore through a squad of combat mechs like they were made of cardboard. Its triumphant roar shaking the very foundations of the station. The hunt had begun. Humanity's greatest prison had become a hunting ground for the galaxy's most perfect predator. The emergency shuttle Starlight Express docked at Omega 7. With a harsh metallic clang that echoed through the damaged station, Dr. Boram Kim stepped off the transport. Her tablet clutched tightly in one hand while her other arm wrapped protectively around her 7-year-old daughter, Sujin. The little girl's eyes were wide with wonder as she took in the massive space station, its corridors filled with alien species she'd only seen in her picture books. "Ayama, look at all the robots," Sujin whispered excitedly, pointing at the damaged security mechs being wheeled past on hover stretchers. Their metal frames were twisted and torn, looking like toys that had been played with too roughly by a giant child. Boram pulled her daughter closer as they hurried through the chaos. Emergency crews rushed past them carrying medical supplies and repair equipment. The air tasted of ozone and burnt metal, and the constant hum of backup generators filled the corridors. Red emergency lights cast everything in an eerie glow, making the shadows dance on the walls like living things. "Dr. Kim." Commander Hyan-Wu's voice cut through the noise as he approached them, flanked by 2 security officers. His uniform was wrinkled and stained, and dark circles under his eyes showed he hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We need every expert we can get." "I'm sorry I had to bring Sujin," Boram said, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. "My babysitter canceled at the last minute, and Earth Command said this was too urgent to delay." "Iyama, why is everyone running?" Sujin asked, her small voice barely audible over the constant alarms. She watched as medical teams rushed past with injured personnel on floating stretchers. Their faces pale and bandaged, Boram knelt down to her daughter's eye level, trying to keep her voice calm. "There's a dangerous animal here, sweetheart. The grown-ups are trying to figure out how to help it, but until then, you need to stay very close to me, okay?" Sujin nodded solemnly. Though her curious eyes continued to dart around the fascinating chaos of the alien space station, she'd never seen so many different species in one place. Tall, blue-skinned centaurians with their elegant movements. Stocky, rock-like granite people who looked like walking boulders, and even a few of the mysterious energy beings from the nebula. Sector floating in their containment suits as they made their way through the damaged corridors. The devastation became more apparent. Blast marks scarred the walls where energy weapons had been fired. Emergency force fields flickered across damaged sections, and the sweet smell of coolant mixed with the metallic taste of blood in the air. "This situation is worse than we reported," Commander Hyan-Wu explained as they walked. "The creature has been systematically destroying our containment systems. It's not just trying to escape anymore, it's hunting." 3 more guards were injured this morning when it somehow triggered a cascade failure in the security grid. They reached the observation deck, where dozens of scientists, military officers, and technicians crowded around massive display screens. The images showed corridors filled with twisted metal and sparking electronics. In the center of it all, Surveillance cameras tracked the movements of something massive and dark moving through the shadows. Bjorn gasped when she saw the damage reports scrolling across the screens. How is this possible? According to these readings, the creature has adapted to every containment protocol in the Galactic database. That's why we need you, said Dr. Minho, approaching with a datapad covered in complex biological readings. Your research on adaptive alien biology is the most advanced in known space. If anyone can figure out how to contain this thing, it's you. While the adults frantically discussed containment strategies, analyzing bio-readings, and debating weapon effectiveness, little Sujin found herself growing bored. The grown-ups were using big words she didn't understand in all their charts, and graphs looked confusing. Her attention began to wander to the more interesting parts of the space station near the back of the observation deck. She noticed a small maintenance panel that had been left open by repair crews. Behind it, she could see a narrow shaft that looked just big enough for someone her size to crawl through. The metal walls were warm to the touch, and she could hear interesting sounds echoing from somewhere deep inside, heavy breathing, like her family's big dog made when he was sleeping. Looking back at the adults, who were all staring at their screens and talking in serious voices, Sujin made a decision. She was good at crawling through small spaces. She'd won every game of hide-and-seek at school by finding places the bigger kids couldn't fit. Maybe she could find the dangerous animal everyone was so worried about and see if it was really as scary as they said. The maintenance shaft was dark, but not frightening. Sujin had always been brave, even when her friends were scared of thunder or the dark corners of their school basement. She crawled forward on her hands and knees, following the warm air currents and the sound of that heavy breathing. The metal was smooth under her palms. Glowing strips along the sides provided just enough light to see where she was going. As she crawled deeper into the station's interior, the sounds grew louder. She could hear the hum of massive machinery, the crackle of electricity, and underneath it all, something that sounded almost like loneliness. It reminded her of the way her dog whimpered when he was left alone, or how she felt when she had to go to bed in her big empty room. Finally, she reached a damaged section where the ventilation grate had been torn away. Bright light spilled through the opening, and she could see into what looked like a huge room. Carefully, she poked her head through the hole and gasped. The room was enormous, with walls that stretched up so high she couldn't see the ceiling. In the center, surrounded by flickering energy barriers and sparking electronics, was the most amazing creature she'd ever seen. It was like a dragon from her storybooks, but real and alive, with midnight black skin that seemed to absorb the light around it. 6 powerful arms moved with liquid grace, and electricity danced across its hide in beautiful blue patterns. Sujin slipped through the opening and dropped quietly into the corner of the massive cell. The creature Vexthul, though she didn't know its name, was pacing back and forth like a caged tiger she'd once seen at the zoo. But when her small feet touched the floor, it froze completely. 6 burning red eyes turned to focus on her, and for a moment the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. This was the creature that had defeated the Council's greatest warriors, outsmarted their most brilliant scientists, and terrorized an entire space station. And now it was staring at a 7-year-old girl in a pink dress who had crawled through a ventilation shaft because she was curious. For the first time in its engineered existence, Vexthul felt something completely new. Not anger, not the thrill of battle, not even the satisfaction of victory. It felt ... confused. This tiny being showed no fear, carried no weapons, displayed no signs of aggression, simply sat there in the corner of its domain. Brown eyes, wide with wonder, was completely unaware that it was facing the galaxy's most feared predator. The Warbeast's bioelectric field, which had been crackling with aggressive energy, began to flicker uncertainly. In all its battles, in all its encounters with the various species of the galaxy, nothing had ever looked at it with such innocent curiosity. There was no hatred in those young eyes, no desire to control or destroy. It's just pure, childlike wonder at meeting something new and different. And in that moment, something deep in Vexthul's genetically engineered mind began to change. Security, Steve Donghan was reviewing damage reports when the motion sensors on his control panel started flashing red. His coffee mug slipped from his hands, shattering on the floor as he stared at the impossible readings coming from containment level 7. Something small had somehow bypassed every single security system in the most fortified prison in the galaxy. That can't be right, he muttered, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. The sensors were designed to detect anything larger than a mouse, yet somehow they'd missed an intruder until it was already inside Vextel's cell. His hands trembled as he switched to the live camera feeds. What he saw made his blood turn to ice water on the main screen. A small human child sat cross-legged on the floor of the Warbeast's cell, looking up at the towering creature with the same expression she might use to watch clouds in the sky. Vextel loomed over her like a living nightmare, 6 massive arms ending in claws that could slice through starship hulls. The creature's bioelectric field crackled with enough energy to power a small city, and its burning red eyes were fixed on the tiny intruder. Breach. Breach. All units to level 7. Donghan shouted into his comm system, his voice cracking with panic. We have an unauthorized civilian in the maximum security cell. Code Black. Code Black. The response was immediate. Emergency alarms shrieked throughout the facility as every available security team dropped what they were doing and raced toward the containment levels. The sound of running boots echoed through the corridors as heavily armed guards sprinted through the damaged hallways, their weapons charging with deadly energy. In the observation deck, Dr. Bioram Kim had been studying bio readings when she heard her daughter's name being shouted over the intercom. She looked up at the main display screen and felt her heart stop completely. There, on the massive monitor, was her little Sujin, sitting calmly in a cell with the most dangerous creature in the known galaxy. Sujin, Boram screamed, her voice carrying across the entire observation deck. She lunged toward the screen as if she could somehow reach through it and pull her daughter to safety. Other scientists grabbed her arms to prevent her from running toward the containment levels, but she fought against them desperately. Let me go, that's my baby, that's my baby. She sobbed, her scientific composure completely shattered. Commander Hyanwu wrapped his arms around her to hold her back, his own face pale with horror at what they were witnessing. Meanwhile, the tactical response team had reached level 7. Captain Sung Min led his squad of 30 elite guards, each one equipped with the most advanced weapons the Galactic Council could provide. Their armor gleamed under the emergency lights as they moved with practiced precision through the damaged corridors. Remember, Captain Suman whispered into his comm as they approached the cell. We have a civilian inside. Watch your fire. Zones. Non-lethal rounds only until we can extract the child. The massive blast doors to Vextel's cell hissed open with a sound like escaping steam. The tactical team burst through in perfect formation, their energy weapons raised and ready. Blue targeting lasers painted the walls as they swept the room, looking for clear shots at the Warbeast. But Vextel's reaction was not what they expected. The creature spun toward them with a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. Its bioelectric field exploded outward in a blinding display of raw power. Arcs of electricity dancing across its obsidian hide like captured lightning. The temperature in the room spiked as energy coursed through the air, making the guards' armor systems beep warnings about dangerous radiation levels. This was the defensive posture they'd seen dozens of times before. It's the same aggressive stance that had preceded the deaths of 23 handlers. Vextel reared up on its hind legs, towering even taller as it prepared to defend its territory from these armed intruders. Its 6 arms spread wide, claws extended, ready to tear through armor and flesh with equal ease. Take the shot, Captain Sungmin shouted, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they couldn't fire with the child so close to the creature. In that moment of deadly tension, with 30 weapons trained on the Warbeast and death hanging in the air like a visible thing, little Sujin stood up from where she'd been sitting. She had been quietly watching the beautiful patterns of electricity dancing across Vextel's skin. But now, she could see that her new friend was getting upset. The little girl had grown up with Beku, her family's large Jindo dog, and she knew exactly what an anxious animal looked like. Vextel's posture, the way it was pacing and showing its claws, Even the crackling energy field, it all reminded her of how Beku acted when strangers came to their house, and he felt threatened. Standing up and placing her small hands on her hips, in the universal gesture of a child who means business, Sujin looked directly at the 15-foot-tall alien predator. Her brown eyes met 6 burning red ones, and in that moment, she wasn't seeing a monster or a weapon. She was seeing a very large, very confused animal that needed someone to help it calm down. "Sit," she said firmly, her voice carrying the same authority she used when Beku was misbehaving or when her classmates were being too loud during story time. The effect was beyond instantaneous. It was magical. Vexel S. bioelectric field dimmed like someone had turned down a dimmer switch. The crackling energy that had been dancing across its hide flickered and died, leaving only the soft glow of the emergency lighting. Its 6 massive arms slowly lowered to its sides, and the aggressive posture melted away like ice in the sun. Then, in a movement that seemed to defy everything the galaxy knew about Vorthok warbeasts, the creature that had terrorized the most secure facility in known space slowly, deliberately, sat down on its haunches. Its burning red eyes never left Sujin's face. And if it were possible for a bioengineered killing machine to look sheepish, that's exactly what Vexthal looked like. The entire facility fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems and the barely audible sound of 30 heavily armed guards trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Energy weapons powered down with soft whining sounds as the tactical team stood frozen, their mouths hanging open behind their helmet. Visor's Captain Sungman's rifle fell to his side as he stared at the impossible scene. In the observation deck, scientists and military officers pressed against the windows, their faces reflecting the same stunned disbelief. Even the emergency alarms seemed to pause as if the station's computer systems were too shocked to continue. Their warnings, Dr. Boram Kim stopped struggling against the arms holding her back, her eyes wide with wonder and terror as she watched her 7-year-old daughter standing calmly in front of the galaxy's most feared predator. The creature that had killed 23 trained handlers was sitting like an obedient pet, waiting for further instructions from a child who barely came up to its knee. And in that moment of perfect silence, everyone in facility, Omega-7 realized, they had just witnessed something that would change everything they thought they knew about the nature of power, control, and the mysterious bond between humans and the creatures they encounter. The medical bay of Omega-7 buzzed with activity as Dr. Boram Kim sat beside her daughter's bed, her hands still shaking from the terror of nearly losing Sujin. The little girl was perfectly fine, chatting happily with the medical droid about the pretty sparkly creature she'd met, completely unaware that she had just accomplished something that had baffled the greatest minds in the galaxy. "Iyama, why does everyone look so surprised?" Sujin asked, swinging her legs from the examination table. "The big doggy was just scared. That's why it was making all that noise and showing its claws. Beku does the same thing when strangers come to our house." Bjoram hugged her daughter tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Sweetheart, that wasn't exactly a dog. That was a very dangerous creature that has hurt a lot of people." "But it didn't hurt me," Sujin said matter-of-factly. "It just needed someone to tell it what to do. Sometimes animals get confused when there are too many people around making loud noises." While Sujin received her medical checkup, the facility's brightest minds gathered in the main conference room. The circular chamber was filled with beings from across the galaxy, tall, elegant Altarians with their crystalline skin, stocky dwarven engineers with their mechanical implants, and even a few energy-based lifeforms flickering inside their containment suits. Dr. Jae-sung, facility's chief scientist, stood at the center of the room, his multiple arms gesturing frantically as he tried to make sense of the data streaming. Across the holographic displays, his species, the Kepler 442 natives, were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical minds, but even he was stumped. "The readings are impossible to explain," he announced, his voice carrying the electronic undertone typical of his kind. "The child used no technology whatsoever. Our sensors detected no psionic energy, no biomechanical enhancements, no quantum field manipulations. She simply spoke a single word, and the most dangerous predator in known space, obeyed instantly. Krix, a battle-scarred Zentari warrior whose people had fought the Vorthok Empire directly, slammed his fist on the conference table. The impact left a dent in the reinforced metal. My people lost entire fleets to creatures like that one. We developed plasma cannons, specifically designed to penetrate their bioelectric shields. How does a human child succeed where our greatest weapons failed? Commander Hyanwu rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. The past 6 months had aged him years as he watched his facility become a graveyard for the galaxy's best and brightest. We've tried everything, he muttered. Neural programming that could rewire the brain of a star destroyer. Biochemical suppressants that could pacify a hive queen. Even quantum-level reality manipulators that can alter the fundamental forces of physics. How does a single word from a 7-year-old child accomplish what our greatest technological achievements couldn't? That's when Dr. Bayer Kim entered the conference room, her research tablet loaded with decades of Earth-based studies. The other species turned to look at her with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, often dismissed as primitive by the more technologically advanced civilizations. "You're all looking at this wrong," Bayer said, her voice cutting through the debate. They activated the room's holographic projector, filling the air with images of Earth's history. Other species try to control through technology and force, but humans evolved differently. The display showed ancient cave paintings of humans working alongside wolves, farmers tending to cattle, and children playing with domesticated animals. For over 30,000 years, we've lived alongside other species, not as masters and slaves, but as partners. We developed something that your advanced civilizations never needed, an instinctive understanding of animal behavior. She pulled up brain scans showing the neural patterns of humans interacting with animals. The images glowed with activity in regions that other species barely used. When Sujin saw Vextel's agitation, she didn't see a weapon or a threat. She saw what her human instincts recognized as a confused, overstimulated animal that needed guidance. Dr. Jae-sung's multiple eyes focused on the data with intense interest. "You're suggesting that human neural evolution has created a unique form of interspecies communication?" "Not communication," Bioram corrected. "Understanding." Daughter's command wasn't about control. It was about providing structure and leadership. Every social animal, no matter how dangerous, has an instinctive need for hierarchy and guidance. Humans learn to provide that guidance through body language, vocal tone, and confident authority. She showed video recordings of human-animal trainers working with everything from tiny birds to massive elephants. "We don't dominate through fear or technology. We earn respect through consistent leadership and clear boundaries." When Sujin told Vextel to sit, she wasn't giving an order to a weapon. She was providing guidance to a creature that had never experienced proper social structure. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ambassador Threshnell, a diplomatic Aquarian whose people had been studying interspecies relations for millennia, leaned forward with interest. "Are you saying that this creature has been searching for leadership, not conquest, but someone to follow? Think about it," Bioram continued. "The Vorthok Empire created Vextel as a weapon, but they never considered its psychological needs. It's been locked in this facility for months, surrounded by beings who see it only as a threat to be contained or destroyed. No one has ever treated it as a living creature with emotional needs. Meanwhile, 3 levels below in the maximum security, Wing Vexel remained exactly where Sujin had left it. The massive creature sat perfectly still, its burning red eyes focused on the cell door. For the first time since its awakening in the Vorthok laboratories, it felt something completely foreign-peace. The Warbeast's bioelectric field hummed softly. No longer the aggressive crackling of a predator ready to strike, but the gentle energy of a creature at rest. Its 6 arms were folded neatly, and its breathing had slowed to a relaxed rhythm that the monitoring systems had never recorded before. But more importantly, Vextel was experiencing an emotion that its creators had never programmed into its genetic code, the desire to please someone rather than dominate them. The little human had looked at it without fear, spoken to it with confidence, and for the first time in its existence, Vextel felt like it belonged somewhere. The creature's enhanced intelligence, originally designed for tactical analysis and combat strategy, was now focused on a single thought: when would the small human return? It had followed her simple command because something deep in its genetically engineered mind recognized the natural authority in her voice. Not the authority of fear or force, but the gentle leadership of someone who genuinely cared about its well-being guards. Monitoring the cell reported that the creature's stress indicators had dropped to levels they'd never seen. It's aggressive. Pheromone production had ceased entirely. The bioelectric field that had been strong enough to disable their equipment was now barely detectable. Most surprisingly, Vextel had begun making soft vocalizations, not the bone-chilling roars of a predator, but gentle sounds that almost resembled purring as the conference continued above. With scientists debating theories and generals questioning strategies, the most dangerous creature in the galaxy sat quietly in its cell, waiting patiently for a 7-year-old girl to visit again and maybe teach it something new about what it meant to be more than just a weapon. The revolution in interspecies relations had begun with a single word, spoken by the smallest person in the room to the largest threat in the galaxy. And for the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, the other species were beginning to understand that sometimes the most primitive approaches were actually the most advanced of all. 6 months had passed since the incident. That changed everything, and Facility Omega-7 looked nothing like the dark, fear-filled prison it once was. The corridors that had once echoed with screams and the sound of twisting metal now buzzed with the cheerful voices of children and the gentle hums of contented creatures. Bright lights had replaced the red emergency lighting, and colorful murals, painted by young visitors, covered walls that had been scarred by claw marks and energy blasts. Sujin, now 8 years old and taller by several inches, walked confidently through these transformed halls with the easy stride of someone completely at home. Her school backpack bounced on her shoulders as she made her way to the main rehabilitation center, greeting the various alien staff members in their own languages. A skill she'd picked up with the amazing speed that only children possess. Good morning, Vex, she called cheerfully in Korean, her voice carrying the same warm authority that had first tamed the galaxy's most feared predator. Behind her, moving with the silent grace of a massive shadow, Vextel followed like the most devoted guardian in the universe. The transformation in the Warbeast was nothing short of miraculous. The creature that had once terrorized entire star systems now wore a simple blue collar around its neck, with a small silver tag that read Sujin's friend in both Korean and Galactic Standard. Its bioelectric field, once a weapon of mass destruction, now glowed with a soft, warm light that made children giggle and reach out to touch the pretty sparkles. "Did you sleep well?" Sujin asked, turning to look up at her enormous companion. Vexel responded with a series of soft rumbling sounds that had become their private language. The creature had learned to modulate its vocalizations so perfectly that it could communicate complex emotions without ever frightening the smaller beings around it. They entered the main rehabilitation center, a vast space that had once been the facility's primary containment area. Now it looked more like a combination playground and classroom, soft grass growing under artificial sunlight, small ponds where aquatic creatures could feel at home, and climbing structures for species that preferred heights. The sound of laughter and playful growls filled the air as dozens of once dangerous creatures played together under careful supervision. In one corner, a group of young crystalline bears from the ice moon of Titan 7 were learning to play gentle games instead of their natural hunting behaviors. These creatures, each the size of a small shuttle, had been rescued from illegal fighting rings and were slowly learning to trust again. When they'd first arrived, they would attack anything that moved. Now they were carefully stacking colored blocks under the guidance of a patient Altarian counselor near the artificial pond. A family of void serpents coiled together in what looked like a happy pile of living shadows. These creatures from the dark spaces between stars had been found drifting near a destroyed cargo ship. Half mad from isolation and hunger, the rehabilitation team had discovered that they were actually highly social creatures who became violent only when separated from their pods. Now reunited, they spent their days creating beautiful patterns in the water, and had even learned to make art by arranging colored stones on the pond bottom. The Galactic Council meeting went better than we hoped, Dr. Boram Kim announced as she approached her daughter and Vexel. She carried a datapad filled with requests and offers from across the galaxy. They're requesting human advisors for 12 more facilities. It seems our primitive approach to animal psychology is revolutionizing xenobiology across the galaxy. Commander Hyenwu, who had traded his military uniform for the comfortable clothes of a rehabilitation center director, joined them with a smile that would have been impossible 6 months ago. His hair had more gray in it now, but the stress lines around his eyes had softened into laugh lines earned from watching daily miracles. The Andorian Republic wants to send their entire diplomatic corps for training, he reported, apparently. They've been having trouble with some of the more aggressive species in their sector, and traditional military responses aren't working anymore. Through the observation windows that now served as viewing areas for visiting scientists rather than security monitors, they could see Sujin's daily training session beginning. A group of young aliens from various species had gathered in the center of the room, some barely taller than Sujin herself, others towering over the adults. They were the children of diplomats, scientists, and military officers, who had heard about the miraculous rehabilitation program and wanted their own young ones to learn these revolutionary new techniques. Remember, Sujin said, in her clear, confident voice as she addressed the group, every creature speaks with their body before they speak with their voice. See how Nyx is holding his tail? She pointed to a young shadow wolf that had been pacing nervously near the back of the group. That means he's worried about something. Who can tell me what we should do? A small Centaurian child raised her blue hand. We should give him space and let him come to us when he's ready. Exactly, Sujin beamed. Never force an animal to interact when they're scared. Trust takes time to build, but it breaks very quickly. Vextel settled beside Sujin like a living mountain, its bioelectric field creating a gentle, protective barrier around the group. The children had initially been frightened of the massive creature, but they quickly learned that Vex was the safest place in the galaxy to be. Its field could deflect energy weapons. 6 arms could catch falling objects from multiple directions at once, and its enhanced senses could detect danger long before any security system. The afternoon training session moved to the outdoor area, where Sujin had set up an obstacle course for the rehabilitation creatures. She picked up a glowing energy ball, toy designed specifically for creatures with bioelectric abilities, and threw it across the field. Fetch, she called out, and immediately a pack of previously violent creatures bounded after it with playful enthusiasm. There were razor hounds from the mining colonies, their metallic fur glinting in the artificial sunlight as they raced each. A pair of crystal spiders clicked and chattered as they used their web-building abilities to create shortcuts through the course. Even a young thunder lizard whose species was known for destroying entire cities when angered carefully picked up the ball in its massive jaws and brought it back with the gentle care of a creature that had learned the value of controlled strength. Vextel watched over them all like a proud parent, its fearsome appearance now a symbol of protection rather than terror. When one of the smaller creatures got tired, it would curl up against the warbeast's warm hide for a nap. When the flying species needed help reaching high places, Vextel would carefully lift them with its powerful arms. The creature that had once been designed to destroy entire armies now spent its days making sure everyone got equal turns with the toys and that no one was left out of the games. As the artificial sun began to set through the facility's transparent dome, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, the day's activities wound down. The various creatures returned to their comfortable living spaces, not cells, but actual homes complete with their preferred climates, foods, and companions. Sujin settled into her favorite spot, curled up against Vextel's warm side with a book about marine biology from Earth. The warbeast's bioelectric field dimmed to a soft, sleepy glow as it wrapped its massive arms protectively around the little girl who had given it purpose. "Story are we reading tonight?" Commander Han Wu asked, settling into a nearby chair. This had become their evening ritual, Sujin would read aloud while the creatures settled down for the night, her voice carrying through the facility's sound system so that even the shyest residents could hear her comforting words.
It's about
Dolphins, Sujin said, opening the book to a page filled with pictures of Earth's oceans. Did you know they're one of the smartest animals on our planet? They help each other and play games, just like Vex and his friends do here. As she began to read, creatures throughout the facility settled down to listen. The crystalline bears, curled up in their heated caves, the void serpents coiled together in their pond, and dozens of other species found comfortable positions to hear the story. Even the facility's staff, aliens from dozens of different worlds, found themselves pausing in their work to listen to the human child's voice. The rehabilitation center had become more than just a place where dangerous creatures learned to be peaceful. It had become proof that the most powerful weapon against violence and fear wasn't superior technology or greater force. It was something much simpler and far more powerful. The understanding that every creature, no matter how fearsome or different, just wanted to belong somewhere. As Sujin's voice filled the facility with stories of Earth's oceans, Vextal purred contentedly, its genetically engineered mind finally at peace. It had found its true purpose not in destruction, but in protection, not in dominating others, but in helping them find their own place in the galaxy. The stars outside continued their eternal dance, but inside the galaxy's first interspecies rehabilitation center, former weapons of war dreamed peaceful dreams. Guided by the wisdom of a child who had seen past their fearsome exteriors to the lonely hearts within, the END